One Piece. The worst pirates in history, starting from Rock's Pirates. Chapter 61. York, is Alabasta the secluded place you mentioned? In a tavern at Oilseed Blossom Port, Kaido curiously asked York. Of course not. York smiled calmly, pointing to the log pose on Stussy's wrist. The secluded place I spoke of is the next island connected by magnetic force to this island. Everyone's faces showed curiosity upon hearing this. The next island connected to Alabasta. Gloriosa asked curiously, but how come I heard that the next island linked by Alabasta's magnetic force simply doesn't exist? Shaki added, it's said that log poses that store magnetic force in Alabasta eventually point to a route leading to the sky. Even if they sail along the pointer and reach an island, it's merely a super small island incapable of storing magnetic force. Countless pirates gather on that island because the path ahead is cut off. But no matter how long they wait there, the log pose won't change. Finally, they always return to Alabasta, by eternal poses for other islands, and take other routes to the end of the first half of the Grand Line. Hearing this, York's face showed a hint of mockery. The log pose points to the sky. Those ignorant pirates don't know what's going on, but don't you? Only then did everyone realize. You mean, Sky Island. Most of the people present had never actually been to Sky Island, only occasionally hearing about it. However, some had been there. For example, Stussy. She went to sea earliest and had been active for many years. She had indeed been to Sky Island. It's just that the Sky Islands she visited were all in the New World. She had never been to the Sky Islands in the first half of the Grand Line. This is truly astonishing. I never imagined the island after Alabasta would be the legendary Sky Island. York, how did you know about this? Hehe, it's a secret. After staying at Oilseed Blossom Port for a few days, York and his group made simple disguises. Shaki, Stussy, and Gloriosa even covered themselves completely. They wore loose robes, opaque face masks, and hoods. If they weren't familiar, one could at most tell they were women from their exposed eyes and faintly visible figures. Nothing else could be discerned. Therefore, even though York and his group stayed there for several days, no one guessed they were the legendary York's crew. Finally, the moment the log pose's magnetic force was fully charged, everyone no longer hesitated, boarded the marine warship they had seized earlier, and set sail immediately. Then, after more than a day of sailing, they successfully arrived at the fragmented Jaya Island. York had no interest in landing on this island. He glanced at the pointer on Stussy's wrist, which still pointed to the sky, and then had Kaido release his flame clouds to lift the ship skyward. Hey! Is that ship flying? On the fragmented Jaya Island, a pirate saw York and his group's movements and called his other companions to look. However, his other companions didn't believe him at all. Are you drunk? How can a ship fly? But, I really saw the ship flying. Right there. Stop talking nonsense. Your behavior will only make everyone else on the island look down on us. But Captain, it's true. Look. The pirate pointed to the sky with a wronged expression, but his companions and his captain didn't even have the interest to look up. I think you're just looking for a beating. Talking unrealistic nonsense all day long, brothers. Beat him. A commotion thus occurred on the fragmented Jaya Island, unknown to York and his group. Or rather, even if they perceived it with observation hockey, they wouldn't care. Just a bunch of small fry pirates, fools who don't even believe in Sky Island, who would likely not even count as cannon fodder in the New World. Lifted by Kaido's flame clouds, the pirate ship slowly ascended. And as the altitude increased, the discomfort caused by changes in air pressure and oxygen deprivation gradually became apparent among the group. However, most of the people present were experts. Even Teach, the youngest, inherited Rox's bloodline. Although uncomfortable, no worst-case scenarios occurred. Finally, the pirate ship finally passed through the clouds and arrived in a vast, white world. Looking at the world before him, seemingly constructed of white clouds, a trace of reminiscence flashed in Stussy's eyes. This is the White Sea, the path to the true Sky Island. An ocean suspended 7,000 meters high. You might not believe it, Kaido, fly over and then release your ability. Kaido was stunned. Aren't you worried the ship will just fall down? It won't. This is the White Sea. Ships can navigate normally here. Hearing this, Kaido half-believingly transported the ship above the White Sea, then released the flame clouds that were lifting the ship. Plop! With a soft splash, the massive marine warship indeed came to a steady stop on the White Sea. This is incredible. Those who had never seen Sky Island exclaimed in wonder. This is just the beginning. Stussy felt a hint of pride and a desire to show off. The true Sky Island is even higher up. Now I'll take command. To find the sea route to the true Sky Island. Under Stussy's command, the warship arrived at the entrance of a special sea route, composed of cloud mountains. Looking at the cloud-formed mountains ahead, York curiously leapt from the warship's deck. Hey, York! This is 7,000 meters. Gloriosa shouted in alarm, but surprisingly, York didn't fall. He stood firm on top of the large cloud mountain and even started bouncing up and down. Ha ha ha. Like a trampoline. York rediscovered his childhood innocence, playing with great delight. Seeing this, Ivankov and others on the warship also became eager. Immediately, York waved to them. Ivankov, Kuma, and Ginny were instantly as if pardoned, excitedly leaping from the ship's edge and beginning to climb one of the cloud mountains. Teach sat on Kuma's shoulder, curiously reaching out to poke the wall of the cloud mountain. It was soft, very elastic, and also very warm, nothing like the hard, cold, and not fun mountains below. After some frolicking, York and his group advanced along the top of the cloud mountain with the pirate ship, guiding the ship's direction. Finally, after passing through the dense cloud mountain range, and after York and his group had to return to the warship because the path was cut off, they found the legendary Sky Island entrance. A stone gate with a sign reading, God's Country, stood on the clouds in the distance. Beside it was a building resembling a reception room, and behind it was a winding white cloud sea route. The ship sailed into the gate and paused next to the guardhouse. An old woman walked out of the guardhouse. Her hair was styled into two small snail tentacle-shaped buns on either side of her head, and she had a pair of small, pure white wings on her back, with a gentle and benevolent face. Oh, it's Angel Grandma. Ginny, Kuma, and Ivankov all exclaimed, their eyes filled with surprise and curiosity. York chuckled. It was indeed like this the first time one saw a Sky Island person. Are you here for sightseeing? Or for war? The old woman looked at York and the others on the warship and asked curiously. York walked to the edge of the ship's rail, a harmless smile on his face. We are here for sightseeing. Upon hearing this, the old woman immediately held out her hand. 10 million IK for entry per person. How much? 10 million. In an instant, everyone who had just been excited to see Angel Grandma all jumped up. 10 million entry fee. Why don't you just rob us? Everyone's faces were indignant. In the end, are you Angel's pirates, or are we pirates? Just as everyone was indignant and about to have York lead them to charge in, Stussy suddenly laughed. It's 10 million IK. Not 10 million berries. Huh. Everyone was startled and shifted their gaze to her. Stussy explained, IK is the common currency of Sky Island, and the exchange rate with berries is 10,000 to 1, 10,000 IK equals 1 berry. This means that the 10 million IK per person the old woman mentioned is actually 1,000 berries per person. The old woman standing on the platform inside the archway smiled and nodded. That's right. Upon hearing this, everyone finally breathed a sigh of relief. Kaido. What, so it's only 1,000 berries, I misunderstood. Gloriosa. 10 million, it sounds really scary, why can't you just say 1,000 berries? Shaki smiled and said, an interesting prank. York didn't bother with the small sum of 10,000 berries and paid the gatekeeper old woman directly. After receiving the money, the gatekeeper old woman didn't delay at all, pulling out a whistle and blowing it on the spot. Splash! Underneath the ship, the clouds that acted as seawater suddenly parted, and two giant shrimp claws emerged from them, clamping the sides of the warship's hull. Wow wow! What is this? Ginny shrieked, a little flustered. They are express shrimp, a special creature of the White Sea. The gatekeeper old woman kindly explained, do you see that cloud path winding up to the sky ahead? Normal ships cannot sail up there, only express shrimp can carry ships up to the Milky Sea. As her voice fell, the express shrimp immediately began to race forward along the waterway. Wah! Amidst the squealing and shouting of the young ones on the ship, the express shrimp carried the warship quickly through thousands of meters of waterway, successfully ascending from the 7,000-meter high White Sea to the true location of Sky Island, the 10,000-meter-high Milky Sea. The warship flew out of the waterway exit, tracing a large parabola, and landed heavily on the special sea clouds of the Milky Sea. Once the shaking subsided, everyone looked up and was immediately awestruck by the beautiful scenery before them. This is Sky Island. So beautiful. It's an island made entirely of white clouds. It's just like a sky city from a fairy tale. Are we going to live here from now on? Everyone's gaze quickly shifted to York, who smiled and nodded. This will be our base before we return to the new world. With that, York walked to the bow of the warship and shouted loudly towards Sky Island. Sky Island. Your emperor has arrived. Your emperor has arrived. Your emperor has arrived. York's voice echoed far and wide, and the residents of Sky Island, who were living their normal lives, collectively froze. Whose voice is that? What is an emperor? Rule us. Who is so bold? This is a nation protected by God. The warship slowly approached the coast of Sky Island. York was too lazy to waste time with the people of Sky Island, so he directly had Kaido transform into a giant azure dragon and take him to an island next to the Cloud Island. What is that? Land. Are there also land islands in the sky? Kaido was slightly surprised, but York didn't explain to him, raising his hand and pointing to a giant vine in the distance. See that vine? That's where Sky Island's ruler and army are stationed. We'll take that place, and this Sky Island will be ours. Kaido looked over at the sound. On that land island, a thick vine wound its way up into the sky. Several layers of white clouds were coiled around the vine in a tiered fashion. One of those layers was in the direction York pointed, where the most concentrated buildings were, and in his observation Haki's perception, the number of living people in that place was also considerable. The giant azure dragon did not hesitate, its slender body winding its way forward. The residents of Sky Island, watching Kaido soar through the sky, their previously defiant expressions immediately turned fearful and devout. A divine descent. The true Lord of the Sky has appeared. Disinterested in these ordinary people, upon arriving at the place where Sky Island's ruler lived, York leapt down from Kaido, who also reverted from his transformation and landed in his normal state. Sky Island's god, to be precise, was Sky Island's ruler, only the title of king had been changed to god. And his god squad had already gathered and waited for a long time in an open space here. They watched York and Kaido descend from the sky, but they were not as undignified as the ordinary residents of Sky Island. The Sky Island god even took a step forward and asked York and Kaido, "You are people from the Blue Sea, aren't you? What are you doing with such a big display?" York looked up and realized that the current Sky Island god was not Gonfall, whom he knew, so he didn't bother with pleasantries. "I'm here to rule you." After saying that, a vast haki roared out from him. A blood-colored domain enveloped the area, and in the eyes of the God Squad soldiers, the entire world instantly turned blood red. They didn't even last a second. The God Squad soldiers fell to the ground in a clatter. Even the Sky Island god, only through York's deliberate consideration, was able to remain conscious while kneeling on one knee. What kind of power is this? Conqueror's haki. The symbol of a king. York patiently explained, then said, "Do you realize the difference in power between us? If you don't want the entire Sky Island to be wiped out by me and my companions, it's better to surrender obediently." The Sky Island god hesitated, concerned about the safety of Sky Island's people. He still mustered the courage to ask, "How do you plan to rule us?" "That's not for you to worry about." Completely conquering Sky Island and defeating the Sky Island god and the God Squad was actually just the beginning. After all, York wanted a Sky Island that could serve as a logistical base, not just a territory to extract wealth from. So, after successfully dealing with the Sky Island god and the God Squad, York set up another arena on Sky Island. Anyone who disagreed with his rule could come up and challenge him. There were no limits on the number of people or weapons and equipment. York would face them all alone. As long as the Sky Island people could defeat York, he would leave Sky Island directly. The result was, a week passed, and despite the Sky Island people trying every trick in the book, not a single person could last a single move against York. York didn't even use Conqueror's haki, he simply used martial arts and conventional two-color haki to take down all challengers. Thus, after the arena battles concluded, all the Sky Island people expressed their respect for York's combat power. Coupled with the fact that York didn't kill indiscriminately, and didn't kill the challengers he defeated in the arena, he displayed a considerable degree of magnanimity and breadth of mind. The Sky Island people then, at the persuasion of the Sky Island god, temporarily submitted to York. Afterward, the Sky Island god held a traditional Sky Island, divine position, handover ceremony, and York officially became the new Sky Island god. However, not long after York became the new Sky Island god, the Sky Island people's sworn enemies, the Shandians, suddenly launched a surprise attack. These poor Shandians had no idea what kind of terrifying existence their opponent had become. They probably thought that the transfer of power between the old and new Sky Island gods would lead to instability within Sky Island, making it a good opportunity for a sneak attack. The result was, York didn't even have to make a move. These guys who actively came knocking were all knocked down and tied up by Kaido with a single club hit. Upon seeing the Shandians, York feigned curiosity and inquired about the feud between them and Sky Island. I think I know how to end this war that has lasted for over 300 years. York casually pulled out the children's book, Nolan the Liar, that he had borrowed from Ohara. Based on this fairy tale book, combined with the accounts of the Sky Island people and the Shandians, he deduced that the Golden City was real, and the Golden Bell was also real, but it had been hidden by a stroke of luck. Afterward, York took the captured Shandians, as well as some of the Sky Island people represented by the Sky Island god. Together, in a pay at the part of Jaya Island that was lifted into the sky by the knock upstream, beneath a landmass, covered by island clouds in the island's left eye, they found the legendary Golden City. The Golden City at this time had not yet been ravaged by Eneru. All the building surfaces were covered with a thick layer of gold, which made the entire city look resplendent. The legendary Golden City, it actually exists. Kaido, Gloriosa, Stussy, Shaki, Dragon, and several youngsters like Ivankov, all widened their eyes and opened their mouths in astonishment as they looked at the Golden City before them, unable to describe their shock in words. Although York had anticipated this, even he couldn't help but feel a tremor in his heart upon seeing an entire ancient city built of gold. The Golden Bell. Why isn't the legendary Golden Bell here? The Shandians, with their hands bound but their feet free to move, rushed to the center of the Golden City faster than York and his group. They collapsed to their knees in despair at a depression in a base, similar to that of some heavy object. Where did the legendary Golden Bell go? The Shandians, losing their minds due to emotional breakdown, angrily accused the Sky Island god and others who had come with them. Did you hide it? Calm down. York raised his hand to quell the Shandians' emotions, walked to the large vine next to the base depression, and patted it. If I'm not mistaken, the Golden Bell is very likely hanging at the very top of this vine. York's guess brought some rationality back to the Shandians. We want to go to the top of the vine and see. How dare you? The top of the vine is the dwelling of God. How can you defile it with your impure and filthy presence? The Shandians made their request, and before York could speak, a God Squad member preemptively rebuked them. York frowned slightly upon hearing this, and he spoke to the former Sky Island god. Expel this person from the God Squad. I'll spare his life this time. If I hear him say such things again, I will kill him. As he spoke, a palpable killing intent was released from York. He did intend to be lenient, but that didn't mean he wouldn't kill. Only by combining both grace and might could one truly win people's hearts. Feeling the killing intent released from York, cold sweat immediately seeped from the Sky Island god's forehead. Thank you for your generosity, God Sama. After throwing the talkative God Squad member out of the Golden City, York and his group began to climb up the vine. Finally, they truly found the moss-covered Golden Bell on a small island cloud encircling the top of the vine. Woo woo woo. The Shandians burst into tears of joy at the sight of the Golden Bell. Our ancestors' promise, we can finally fulfill it. Woo woo woo, our ancestors' spirits are watching. After the Shandians' emotions stabilized, York solemnly said, I am now the ruler of Sky Island. Theoretically, everything on Sky Island belongs to me. However, seeing as you Shandians are the original inhabitants of the Golden City, and the Golden Bell was indeed once your property, I grant you special permission to live back in the Golden City and manage the Golden Bell for me. From now on, you must ring the Golden Bell precisely at 8 a.m., 12 p.m., and 4 p.m. every day. This is both to fulfill your ancestors' long-cherished wish. and to complete the task I have given you. Besides that, all the gold in the entire Golden City belongs to me. You have no right to take any of it. Upon hearing this, several Shandians voluntarily walked up to York and knelt on one knee. Thank you for God's grace. We are willing to obey God's command. And so, under the guidance of these Shandians, York and his group successfully found the cloud-hidden village where the Shandians lived, and subjugated the entire Shandian tribe. Of course, just like with Sky Island, York also demonstrated his power before them. He showed that he was not allying with them out of fear of their strength, but simply out of pity for them, helping them fulfill their ancestors' long-cherished wish. Under a combination of grace and might, the Shandians completely pledged their loyalty, even more so than the Sky Island people. After subjugating the Shandians, York also carried out a sweeping reform of the existing God Squad. First, he removed those with discriminatory attitudes. Then, he held a martial arts tournament to select new God Squad members. There were no rules or restrictions, except that opponents could not be killed. The capable would rise, the incompetent would fall. The new God Squad would be composed of both Shandians and Sky Island people. The results of this selection were brutal. The Sky Island people only won a mere 1/3 of the seats, while the remaining 2/3 were taken by the Shandians. To maintain balance and also to soothe the wounded feelings of the Sky Island people, York further expanded the God Squad, readmitting some of the defeated Sky Island people into the God Squad, making their numbers equal to the Shandians who joined the new God Squad. And then, based on this newly formed God Squad, York initiated a new round of reforms for Sky Island. For example, rebuilding laws, abolishing old rules, teaching new farming and production methods, and so on. These agricultural aspects will not be elaborated on here. Unconsciously, a year passed. The entire Sky Island underwent tremendous changes under York's governance. To put it simply, it was a scene of prosperity. Dragon witnessed all of this firsthand, and while he was inwardly shocked, he also developed a strong sense of approval for York. Even though Sky Island, under York's rule, still had a privileged class and was far from the idealized state of absolute fairness that Dragon most longed for. But, as York once said, you have to eat one bite at a time, and walk one step at a time. It's impossible to jump directly from a slave society to an era of absolute fairness. For their generation, completely abolishing slavery, sweeping the old nobility into the dustbin of history, and ensuring that everyone in the world could eat their fill, accomplishing these three tasks was enough. The truly idealized, fair world would be left for future descendants to achieve. Thinking of this, Dragon withdrew his gaze from a construction site on Sky Island and looked up at the sky. At the top of the giant vine, there was a newly constructed island cloud platform. After completing his daily government duties, York spent most of his time there, cultivating and improving his strength with Kaido and others. Sizzle. A conqueror's hockey-infused punch slammed into Kaido, sending him flying. York stopped his follow-up movements and looked at Kaido, who was slowly getting up in the distance. Did you see it clearly? The technique of conqueror's hockey coating. Kaido raised his hand to rub the spot he had just been hit, closed his eyes, and carefully savored the sensation transmitted by York's punch. I seem to have grasped a bit of the knack, but it also feels like something is still missing. York frowned slightly. He hadn't expected Kaido to still not have mastered Haoshoku after all this time. Kaido's talent should clearly be stronger than his, so why was he so slow? Could it be because the world version hadn't been updated yet? Before the protagonist Luffy's birth, the entire world's cultivation and growth had to proceed step by step. Only after the protagonist Luffy's birth would the era of super speed improvement truly begin. If the world will truly existed, perhaps this conjecture could also be true. If that's the case, I do seem to be a bit too anxious. Never mind. If something is still missing, then let's continue. York stretched his limbs, once again coating his fist with Conqueror's Hockey to spar with Kaido. After today's training, Kaido chose to stay put and meditate, while York returned to his residence. His current residence was the former god's abode, which had only undergone minor renovations. He had also dismissed the maids and attendants who provided free services, opting instead to hire them for pay, which significantly reduced their numbers. Taking off his dirty clothes, York enjoyed a comfortable shower, then simply wrapped a towel around himself and headed to Gloriosa's bedroom, intending to have a good heart-to-heart with her. But as soon as he opened the door, the familiar figure was not there. Instead, a small note was left on the table. Come to Mirror World. York looked up at the full-length mirror in the bedroom, and after a soft chuckle, he stepped through. With one step, the space shifted. The mirror world, with countless mirrors hanging on the walls on both sides, appeared before him. York didn't linger and continued walking forward, finally stopping at the door of a small house standing in the mirror world. This was a small house they had manually built in the mirror world during this time. After all, although the mirror world was an independent spatial world, its space was too vast and exposed. Playing directly here always felt like being out in the wild. Building a small house meant they wouldn't have to worry about being spied on. The reason York stopped at the door of the small house at this moment was actually very simple. He sensed 3 auras from within the house. Is that Shaki? Heh, those two really know how to surprise me. Chuckling softly, York temporarily withdrew his observation hockey perception and raised his hand to open the wooden door of the small house. Welcome home. 3 voices, specially rehearsed, rang out simultaneously. York, who had withdrawn his observation hockey perception, was truly surprised and froze at the entrance in that instant. He saw, on the single step of the entrance, 3 figures in maid outfits knelt neatly. On the left, Stussy. Blonde hair, blue eyes, and fair skin that caught the eye. On the right, Gloriosa. Charming and alluring, her prominent chest made York can't help but swallow his saliva. In the middle, Shaki. She was the only one of the 3 maids present who was dressed in a normal maid outfit, revealing nothing. But at the same time, her cheeks were also the reddest among the 3 maids. In fact, she was even forcibly blindfolded, and her hands were tied behind her back. What are you all? York licked his dry lips and silently closed the door of the small house. Gloriosa smiled and winked at him. Sister Shaki has always had trouble preparing herself, so we specially helped her out today. Stussy was the first to rise from her kneeling position, wrapping her arms around York's body. Time is short, and you still have work tomorrow. Let's start now. 2 hours later. Gloriosa and Stussy lay on either side of Shaki. The girl, whose eyes had been covered the entire time, restlessly moved her numb kneeling legs. Finally, that burning aura that had tormented her for 2 hours gradually approached. Don't worry, I'll be gentle. Their lips met, and Shaki gradually lost consciousness. A full year after rescuing Shaki from God Valley, York finally succeeded in winning her affection. Before today, it wasn't that he couldn't have forced her, but he was unwilling to do so. After all, Shaki was not an enemy, unlike Gloriosa back then, and moreover, Rayleigh was still in her heart. It was always better to have her willingly submit to him than to force it. 2 days later. York, who had been on strike for 2 consecutive days, lay on the large bed in the small house, embracing Shaki's smooth and delicate body. Feeling the beauty in his arms slowly awaken, he gently hooked her nose with his finger. Do you regret it? You haven't forgotten Rayleigh, have you? Shaki was silent for a moment, then finally let out a soft sigh. I don't know. I was forced by Gloriosa and the others. York narrowed his eyes and smirked mischievously. Shaki was trying to be a bad girl. No admission, no initiative, no refusal. She was forced, and the responsibility lay entirely with Gloriosa, Stussy, and him, York. What a greedy woman. She wants me, but she doesn't want to give up Rayleigh either. Since that's the case, I'll make sure you can't live without me. You won't have any thoughts of Rayleigh ever again. Feeling her body about to be overwhelmed, Shaki quickly raised her hand to block York. Wait. You haven't handled government affairs for 2 days. It doesn't matter. The hardest part is over. The current work consists of minor tasks, and Gloriosa and Stussy can handle them for me. Wait again. The moment York left the mirror world, he felt a sense of relief. After quickly dealing with the accumulated government affairs of the past few days, York stretched luxuriously. It's about time. A sharp glint flashed in his eyes. Any transmigrator who crossed over as early as he did, especially after arriving at Sky Island, would never miss out on a devil fruit. Logia type. Rumble rumble fruit. As one of the devil fruits Robin called the strongest, this fruit had almost no opponents, except for its natural enemy, Luffy. If it weren't for the fact that York couldn't survive without using his will to distort reality and obtain the Hobie Hobie no Mi back then, he would have tried everything to eat the Rumble Rumble fruit as his own ability. Although he no longer had such a high demand for the Rumble Rumble fruit, it would be good to acquire it and use it to train an admiral-level subordinate. It was much better than letting it wander outside, only to be eaten by Eneru and then challenged by him. Acting on his thoughts, York summoned the former Sky Island god to him and asked him about the location of Burka Island. The Sky Island god had never been to Burka Island, but he knew how to find it. So, with him as a guide, York called Kaido, and the three of them set off together. One day later, under Kaido's incredible flying speed, they successfully arrived at Burka Island. From an aerial view, the island was smaller than York had expected, with only a few hundred residents. The most striking building was a temple located in the center of the island. Facing the obstruction of the local Burka people, York and Kaido fought their way into the temple and finally found the Rumble Rumble fruit in the palm of a statue within the temple. As York took the Rumble Rumble fruit, the temple priest immediately jumped up in agitation. Outsiders. You cannot take the power of God. This is our greatest treasure. York chuckled, releasing a holy light tentacle that wrapped around the priest. The latter immediately fell to the ground, curled up like a shrimp, his face filled with a silly, joyful grin. Then the silly grin was gradually replaced by pain, and finally, his whole body convulsed. Blood mixed with yellowish liquid seeped out from beneath him, and he died on the spot. Walking out of the temple, the local Burka Island guards lay dead on the ground outside. York ignored the corpses and walked to a pigpen-like building not far from the temple. Opening the simple prison door made by the Burka Islanders, dozens of Blue Sea people without wings on their backs were locked inside. York's gaze swept over them. All these people wore shackles and had tattoos signifying slavery. In addition, most of their tattered clothes bore various pirate crew symbols. Presumably, these people were once pirates who, by chance, ventured to Sky Island, but instead of plundering, they were captured and enslaved by the Burka Islanders. Kaido realized this when he saw the scene. No wonder you started killing as soon as you arrived, without any intention of negotiating. So, that's what this is all about. York looked at the startled and anxious slaves in the cell and said in a deep voice, I came for a devil fruit, finding you was just a coincidence. Now you have two choices. First, stay here and continue being slaves. Second, come with me, but from now on, you must obey everything I say. As his voice fell, the slaves in the cell eagerly knelt before York. We are willing to go with you. We are willing to obey you. As long as you can take us away from here. And so, when Kaido transformed into a azure dragon and took off from Burka Island again, dozens of ragged but hopeful slaves were on the flame clouds swirling around him. Returning to Sky Island. The newly acquired Rumble Rumble fruit, like the remaining fruits from God Valley, was placed in the mirror world for safekeeping by York. Shaki and Gloriosa, as before, still wanted to enjoy bathing despite the temptation of the Rumble Rumble fruit. York didn't insist on it. Because among the slaves he brought back this time, he saw a 2-year-old half-breed with only one wing on his back. On the way back, he casually asked the mother of this half-breed. The mother replied, the child's name is Eneru. With Eneru present, the Rumble Rumble fruit would not lack an owner in the future. However, the key issue was to first cultivate Eneru's loyalty to him. Fortunately, he was only 2 years old now, and like Teach, who was 3 this year, he had ample room for education. So, York simply hired the mother to be a nanny to look after Teach, and incidentally, let the 2-year-old Eneru and 3-year-old Teach become playmates. Kuma, Ginny, and Ivankov were, after all, older than Teach. Especially Ivankov, who was already 16 this year, was approaching adulthood. Ginny and Kuma were also 14 and 10 years old, respectively, but Ginny had been malnourished before God Valley, so she looked like she wasn't even 10. Now, after being well fed by York for a year, she was like a plant that had been force-fed, not only recovering her health but also properly beginning to develop. After dealing with the returned slaves, life on Sky Island returned to normal. During the day, they worked, trained, and occasionally gave lessons to Ivankov and others. At night, in the mirror world, he would be intimate with his 3 women in turns. Days passed like this. Until one day, Stussy suddenly received a den mushi call from an old friend. After chatting for about half an hour, Stussy said to York with a face full of pleasant surprise, "York. Good news. Good news. What good news?" York paused his hand from roaming over Stussy and asked seriously. The latter excitedly told him, "A young genius I knew before I joined the Rocks Pirates has grown up over the years, gained abilities, and met several partners. Now he has received financial support from Dufeld and is preparing to establish a research institute. He wants to invite me to help." York was immediately surprised upon hearing this. Mads Research Institute. Stussy was equally surprised. "How do you know that name?" "That's not important." York stared intently at Stussy. "Is the name of that genius boy you know Vegapunk?" "Yes." Stussy looked at York with a puzzled expression. "How did this young man even know Vegapunk?" "Ha ha 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 ha." York ignored the slight oddity on Stussy's face, hugged her, and fiercely kissed her on the cheek. "Stussy. You truly are my good wife. Ha 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 ha." Stussy smiled at his words, immediately casting aside all her inner doubts. What if York had secrets? Who didn't have some secrets that their significant other didn't know? As York's laughter gradually subsided, Stussy asked, "Are you planning to incorporate Vegapunk in his Mads Research Institute?" "It's truly you. You guessed it." York kissed Stussy again and explained. "Do you remember those scientific books we found in Ohara back then?" Stussy nodded gently. "Of course I remember." She was quite shocked when they discovered those books. She hadn't expected that many discoveries and inventions that modern scientists were so proud of had actually appeared long before in ancient times. In fact, ancient technology was far more powerful than what they had now. To replicate the ancient technology from those books in Ohara, one devil fruit is indispensable. The Paramesha-type brain fruit. York smiled at Stussy. And a major characteristic of a Paramesha-type brain fruit user is that their head will grow larger and larger due to the ability, eventually becoming as massive as a giant race member. Stussy blinked her beautiful eyes, and the image of Vegapunk's impressively large head from their first meeting automatically appeared in her mind. "Although I'm not familiar with Vegapunk, I've seen his photos in some newspapers and magazines, so I was impressed by his large head." This was both a temporary excuse York made up and a reality of this world. Before officially establishing Mads, Vegapunk was already somewhat famous in the scientific community, but ordinary people simply didn't pay attention to scientific news. Now with your mirror world, we can easily go to Ohara to read those books. Once we also bring in Vegapunk, the brain fruit user, to join us, realizing the ancient technology from those books will just be a matter of time. Upon hearing this, Stussy imagined the scene York described and immediately became somewhat excited. "I'll contact them right away to confirm the meeting location." "Wait a moment." York grabbed Stussy, who was about to leave him, and whispered in her ear, "There's no rush for this moment. Let me properly thank you, my capable assistant, first." Stussy's pretty face flushed, and she lightly spat. "You're impossible." The next day, Stussy confirmed the meeting location with Vegapunk and his team via transponder snail. Before departing, York found Ivankov, who was training with Kaido. "Ivankov. Captain York. We're going out. Go prepare, I'm taking you with us this time." Ivankov's face lit up with joy. "Are we finally leaving this place?" Although Sky Island had beautiful scenery and the legendary Golden City and Golden Bell, it was, after all, isolated from the world. At their age, Ivankov and his companions were at their most curious about the outside world, so making them stay in a place that wasn't their homeland for a long time was indeed a bit of a torment. York smiled at Ivankov, then turned his head to see Ginny, whose eyes were also full of anticipation. He casually tossed a devil fruit to Ginny. "Ginny, you're not young anymore. In 2 more years, you can also participate in missions. This is the Paramesha-type barrier fruit. Eat it, develop its ability well, and I'll take you out with me in 2 years." Ginny clumsily caught the fruit and nodded obediently to York. "Thank you, Captain York." Seeing this, Ivankov also bowed and thanked York. Although the fruit wasn't for him, as the elder brother of the trio, he also hoped to see Ginny and Kuma have a bright future. York smiled and patted Ivankov's shoulder. Don't worry, I already have a target for the devil fruit that's most suitable for you, I'll arrange it for you sooner or later. After painting a grand picture for Ivankov, York went to find Rue. Rue, I'm going out to do something. Do you want to come along? Rue's expression changed in surprise. Where to? To meet a future world's greatest scientist. And, I'm going to find someone to build our pirate cruise ship. It makes us look poor always sailing in a marine warship. Rue chuckled, not expecting York to care about such small matters. No problem. I also feel like I've been on Sky Island for a bit too long. I'll join you on this mission. Several days later, a warship flying a crimson pirate crew flag leapt from the edge of Sky Island. The massive hull immediately began to freefall, but at this critical moment, a gust of wind surged, supporting the warship from all directions. Escorted by this strong wind, the warship smoothly glided from 10,000 meters high into the vast and magnificent sea. After a year, finally seeing this blue ocean again, York couldn't help but take a long, deep breath. The salty sea breeze is unpleasant, but also nostalgic. Stussy raised her left wrist, the log pose on it pointed to the direction of the next island. A day later, York and his group successfully arrived at Long Ring Long Land. They didn't stay there for long. After the log pose's magnetic force was fully charged, they headed directly to the next island. At the same time, that was also the island Stussy had agreed to meet Vegapunk and his team on, Water 7. Departing from Long Ring Long Land, after 2 days of sailing, they successfully arrived at Water 7. As the island from the previous arc of the original story, the highly praised Enies Lobby arc, and also an important island where the Straw Hat Pirates changed their pirate cruise ship. York also held great expectations for this island. The ship docked, but not at a regular port. Instead, they found a secluded corner to anchor. The reason was simple. Water 7 is one of the world government's joint nations. Although Water 7 is not a country and its leader's title is mayor, it pays the heavenly tribute and is protected by the world government and the marine. So, at least on the surface, pirate cruise ships cannot openly dock there. Walking through the city streets of Water 7, which resembled fountains, it was very different from the prosperity York remembered. Shops were scarce, tourists were sparse, and only the city's waterway infrastructure appeared exceptionally grand and beautiful. Vegapunk had contacted Stussy yesterday. He said he wouldn't arrive at Water 7 until at least tomorrow. Therefore, after a brief tour of the city, York and his group began to inquire about the location of Tom's workers, with a clear objective. The people of Water 7 were accustomed to the arrival and inquiries of pirates. After all, this island lived by shipbuilding. Besides taking orders from the world government, their second largest client group was pirates. With the kind guidance of several passers-by, York and his group successfully found Tom's workers, located under a large bridge. Coincidentally, Tom was about to leave at that moment, and York immediately stepped forward. Hello, Mr. Tom, my name is York, and I am a pirate. I'd like to ask you to build a pirate cruise ship for me. Marineford, Marine Headquarters. What did you say? Adolf D. York is suspected to have appeared in Water 7. A piece of news that had been awaited for nearly a year finally arrived, and Sengoku, who was resting at headquarters, showed a grave expression. Since York's last appearance in the Sorbet Kingdom in the South Blue, where he massacred a large number of nobles, the Marine had dispatched Marine hero Garp and elite Vice Admiral Suru. The two joined forces, preparing to nip the newly formed Red Flag pirates in the bud. However, when Garp and Suru arrived at the Sorbet Kingdom, the Red Flag pirates had already left, vanishing without a trace. Later, someone reported that the Red Flag pirates were suspected to have appeared in Alabasta, because one person's features matched Kaido on the wanted poster. Garp and Suru once again headed to Alabasta. The final result was the same as in the Sorbet Kingdom. By the time they arrived, the Red Flag pirates had once again left a step ahead. Then, from that point on, the Red Flag pirates seemed to have completely disappeared, with no further news emerging. The volatile Garp insisted on searching for several months, but in the end, he could only hastily conclude the search. Now, with news of the Red Flag pirates finally resurfacing, Sengoku immediately took it seriously. Time was pressing. He couldn't confirm the accuracy of the information. Nor could he guarantee that this pursuit wouldn't be another near miss, like the previous 2 times. But adhering to the principle of, better to kill 1,000 innocents than let one guilty person escape, Sengoku immediately contacted Garp and Suru, informing them of the suspected appearance of the Red Flag pirates in Water 7. Idiot son. You're finally willing to show yourself. Your old man is coming to beat you up. Garp instantly knocked out the pirate crew he was chasing, immediately ordering his warship to turn its bow and head towards Water 7. Water 7. The fishman Tom was in his prime, but his physique was already almost identical to his old age, so York recognized him at a glance. After a brief negotiation, Tom readily agreed to York's shipbuilding request. Well, there was nothing to refuse, it was a business to make money, and taking orders was taking orders, no matter who they were from. The two parties finally agreed that the shipbuilding cost would be 10 million berries, with Tom responsible for design and construction. This was purely labor cost. As for the shipbuilding materials, York would provide them. It wasn't that York thought the shipbuilding materials Tom could acquire would be poor, but rather that he had the best procurement channels for materials. After leaving Tom, York and Stussy immediately entered the mirror world. Through the mirror world, they found a mirror in Ida's tavern, and York and Stussy directly crossed tens of thousands of kilometers, appearing in Ida's tavern in Elbaf. Yo! Ida, long time no see. The sudden greeting startled Ida, who was busy behind the bar. She scanned left and right with her eyes, only then discovering York and Stussy, who had suddenly appeared on the bar. York. Stussy. How did you two end up here? Saying this, she turned her head to look out the window but did not see any sign of a pirate ship. Stussy smiled and interrupted her, demonstrating her devil fruit ability to travel through mirrors. We are still in the first half of the Grand Line, we came directly to you using our abilities. That's truly amazing. Ida couldn't help but exclaim. There's even such a convenient devil fruit ability. After some pleasantries, York casually asked, where's Harold? Is he in Elbaf? Ida nodded gently, he is. I'll notify him for you right away. With that, Ida pulled out a Den Den Mushi and contacted Harold, who was in the Elbaf Royal Palace. After a short wait in Ida's tavern, Harold, with a gloomy face, opened the tavern door. Yo, Harold, long time no see. York greeted him with a smile, ignoring Harold's gloomy expression. Harold tried to force a smile, but due to his heavy heart, his entire face became somewhat contorted. What happened, Harold? You seem to be in such a bad mood. Harold sat down at the bar, took a sip of his drink, and then let out a long, melancholic sigh. It's the world government. They've been pushing their luck lately. York instantly understood. Presumably, Rox's death had significantly reduced the world government's apprehension towards Harold. After all, the friendship between Rox and Harold was no secret. Not to mention that the traitor Wang Ji must have sold all the information about the entire Rox pirates. Even if the world government wanted to investigate it themselves, it wouldn't be difficult to find out. In the past, when Rox was still alive, the world government would worry about forcing Harold and Rox into an alliance, so in both their words and various actions, they would give Harold ample respect, even when refusing him. But now, Rox was dead, and the world government's major concern was gone. Harold, at least on the surface, also lost his strongest ally. From now on, the world government would only have to face a solitary Elbaf, no longer accompanied by any external forces. Naturally, their attitude would definitely become completely different from before. It was therefore only natural for Harold to be depressed because of this. Have you still not given up on the extravagant hope of joining the world government? York asked Harold, his eyes lowered. The latter took another sip of his drink and sighed. My goal isn't actually to become a member states, but to let the world know that Elbaf isn't just barbaric. We are also a civilized nation. A civilized nation that can be communicated with. York let out a light chuckle at his words, also picking up a small glass that Ida had specially prepared for their stature and taking a sip. There's no difference. The principles are still the same ones I mentioned before. Only nations with sufficiently sharp swords or ancient civilizations. If your swords are not sharp enough, then even if you have thousands of years of uninterrupted history from ancient times to the present, you are not a civilized nation, but a barbaric land that drinks blood and eats raw meat. Harold frowned slightly. In truth, his heart was gradually coming to accept York's theory at this moment. It was just that years of effort still left him with a naive fantasy and a glimmer of hope. Forget it, I won't argue with you about this. Tell me, why did you suddenly visit Elbaf this time? It's nothing major. York gestured to Stussy, who brought out several boxes from the mirror world and placed them in front of Harold. Click, click. The boxes opened, and the sight of green berries instantly filled Harold's eyes. I just came to you to buy some shipbuilding materials. Treasure Tree Atom, in our human society, is the world's #1 shipbuilding timber. You're just here to buy shipbuilding materials. Harold looked at the several large boxes of berries on the table in surprise. You could have just told me about such a small matter, there's no need to give me money. That won't do. York put down the wooden mug in his hand and said in a deep voice, as the saying goes, even close brothers should keep clear accounts. Perhaps the treasure tree atom is just common wood to Elbaf, but in the outside world, it's a rare material that's hard to come by. Obtaining it could even trigger a small-scale war. I'm grateful that you're gifting me materials for free because of our friendship, but I can't let you suffer a loss. After all, as a friend, I also have to consider the situation of you Elbaf. Harold's eyes flickered as he looked at the several large boxes of berries York pushed over. As a responsible king, he was quite sensitive to money. A quick glance at these several large boxes of berries, and it was definitely no less than 1 billion. Even for the entirety of Elbaf, it was a considerable sum of money. Especially now that Elbaf was under diplomatic pressure from the world government, having such a sum of money would indeed make Harold feel much more at ease. Since you've said so, then I won't stand on ceremony. The next day, Harold led his men, pulling a large cart of lumber, to Ida's tavern. York stepped forward to inspect and was astonished to find that these logs were specially processed wood, not the freshly cut timber he had expected. He looked up at Harold, who gave him a slight smile. These are our spare materials for shipbuilding. The size is a bit large, but if you're building small boats, you can cut them freely. York chuckled. He understood. This was Harold returning the favor, responding to his earlier words about them being friends and needing to be considerate of each other. Thank you. There was no need to be coy, York frankly accepted Harold's goodwill. Through a huge mirror that Harold had specially arranged to be brought, these logs were smoothly transferred into Stussy's mirror world. After a brief greeting with Harold, York and Stussy returned to Water 7 together. A day and a half passed. Water 7 was still the same, except that a large ship with the MADS logo was now docked next to York's warship. The 4 giants on board, Vegapunk, Queen, Vinsmoke Judge, and Caesar Clown, had already disembarked and met up with Dragon and Ivankov. When York and Stussy returned from Elbaf, they saw the 4 of them indulging themselves in the tavern. Vegapunk, with his large, lightbulb-like head, had his left arm around a local Water 7 beauty, his right hand holding a wooden mug, drinking until his face was flushed. Queen, who didn't yet have his later rotund physique, sported a mohawk haircut, dressed in a biker gang outfit, and stood on the stage where the bar singer performed, holding a guitar, singing and rock and rolling. Judge and Caesar sat opposite each other at the same table, foreheads pressed together, jabbering and arguing about their respective research achievements and ideas. Dragon sat to the side, looking at these 4 individuals who completely contradicted his impression of top scientists, his eyes filled with disillusionment. Ivankov. York scanned the tavern and almost didn't spot him. This guy was actually standing on the stage with Queen, dancing along with him. And his position was very tricky, mostly obscured by Queen, which was why York didn't notice him immediately. Seriously. York sighed lightly, unable to help but cover his face with one hand. He knew these 4 guys weren't exactly serious, but he hadn't expected them to leave such a deep impression on him on their very first meeting. Stussy looked at Vegapunk, whose hand was roaming over the woman beside him while he heartily drank from a wooden mug, her beautiful eyes filled with shock. In her memory, Vegapunk was a good boy. When they first met years ago, Vegapunk perfectly fit the stereotype of a bookish scientist. Yet, only a few years had passed, and this guy was almost becoming a hooligan. If she hadn't been keeping up with news in the scientific community, she wouldn't have believed that this Vegapunk was the same Vegapunk she had met back then. Cough. Cough. York coughed heavily twice. The people in the tavern glanced at him, and apart from Dragon, who looked like he wanted to say something but didn't, no one paid him any mind. However, when Vegapunk saw Stussy, his entire body trembled. Then, like a student caught slacking by his homeroom teacher, he not only withdrew his hand from the woman beside him but also placed his empty wooden mug back on the table, sitting upright with a slight smile on his face. It's been a long time, Stussy, sister. Vegapunk said the word, sister, with a hint of shyness, much like a pure-hearted young man. However, this was only if one ignored his recent actions and the beautiful woman still sitting beside him. PFF'd. Stussy ultimately couldn't help but laugh out loud. That young man who couldn't even speak fluently when he saw me back then has certainly grown up after all these years. Vegapunk's cheeks flushed, but since he was already red-faced from drinking, it was almost indistinguishable. Sister is still as beautiful as she was back then, not changed at all. How can I not have changed? I'm getting old after all. A flicker of genuine melancholy passed through Stussy's eyes, then she hugged York's arm, leaning her entire body against him. Fortunately, I've found my own happiness now, and I don't have to be troubled like I was back then. Vegapunk's expression stiffened, and a trace of hostility flashed in his gaze towards York. York's eyebrow twitched, and he rolled his eyes to glance at Stussy. There was a secret between these two. But from the looks of it, it seemed to be a one-sided crush from Vegapunk. That wasn't hard to understand. If York were still his past self, meeting a woman like Stussy at the age of 17 or 18, and they traveled together for a while, forming a brief friendship. If it were York, he would also develop some feelings for Stussy. In the original story, Vegapunk choosing Stussy as the mother for the first clone might not have been without the idea of, if his love wasn't reciprocated, using scientific means to clone their daughter, as a form of solace. Stussy later using cloning to create Weevil was likely also inspired by Vegapunk. Thinking of this, York couldn't help but curl his lips. It's just a pity that he had already gotten there first in this life. Cloning Weevil definitely wouldn't happen again. As for cloning Stussy, York wrapped his arm around Stussy's slender waist, and the two walked into the tavern, sitting down in front of Vegapunk. Vegapunk's eyes were fixed on York's arm around Stussy, and he silently licked his lips. Seeing this, York smiled faintly and extended his other hand to Vegapunk. Nice to meet you. My name is York, and I am Stussy's husband. Husband. Vegapunk was stunned. As soon as the word, husband, came out, his mood, which he thought he had prepared for, instantly became indescribable. Especially looking at York's face, he seemed to be a few years younger than himself. A bitter taste filled his mouth, but Vegapunk still had no choice but to reach out and lightly shake York's hand. Nice to meet you, I am Vegapunk. After an introduction, York got straight to the point. Without further ado, I hope Mads Institute can work for me from now on. Vegapunk was stunned again, but this time not because of Stussy, but because of York's words. This is our first time meeting today, right? You're just going to ask us to work for you. Isn't that a bit rude? Vegapunk didn't say the last sentence, but the meaning was very clear. York pursed his lips and smiled, silently pulling out his wanted poster from his pocket and placing it on the table. Your intelligence work isn't very good, is it? You dare to meet us without even finding out who Stussy is following now. I have to admire that you scientists still have some courage and spirit. Vegapunk silently focused his gaze on the wanted poster York had produced, looking at the bounty amount with 9 zeros after the 3 feet, and swallowed with a gulp. You are the legendary Fallen Master. Cold sweat instantly seeped from Vegapunk's forehead, and his alcohol-muddled brain completely cleared. Only now did he realize that after the Rocks pirates disbanded, Stussy didn't go solo but instead formed a new pirate crew with the Fallen Master, York. How much research funding did Dufeld give you? York asked, and Vegapunk quickly shook his head. I can't say. York smiled faintly. No matter how much he gives you, I can give you more. It's not a matter of how much money. Vegapunk barely managed to argue. We have already signed a cooperation agreement with him, and breaching the contract would be a loss of credibility. I see. York feigned sudden understanding. You mean, as long as Dufeld breaches the contract first, you'd be willing to come to me, right? No. That's not it. Vegapunk quickly denied it. But facing York's direct threat, he really didn't know how to respond. In fact, the main point was that he was intimidated by York's terrifying bounty, which made him genuinely believe that although Dufeld had abilities, in front of York, he would probably only have to meekly submit. Although that was indeed the truth. But Dufeld was not completely powerless to resist. At least if he couldn't fight, he could hide. With his financial resources, if he devoted himself to hiding, York would have trouble finding him. Seeing Vegapunk somewhat flustered by his intimidation, York subtly observed the other 3 people remaining in the tavern. Queen was still singing and dancing, but his attention was now fully focused here. On the other side, Judge and Caesar, who had been arguing earlier, had temporarily stopped their quarrel and were also silently observing him. And like Vegapunk, cold sweat was seeping from their foreheads. Clearly, although York and Vegapunk's conversation just now wasn't loud, both of them had heard it. After a moment of hesitation, York simply stood up from his seat. How about this? You've all had a lot to drink today, and your minds might not be clear, so let's rest for another day. We'll discuss important matters tomorrow. With that, he directly turned and left the bar, calling out to Dragon and Ivankov, with only Stussy not following them. Gulp. Watching York and the others leave, Vegapunk swallowed again. A moment later. Calming down, Vegapunk actively patted the alluring hip of the lady beside him, telling her to leave. The tavern owner, seeing this, also very tactfully retreated backstage. Queen stopped his singing and dancing, and Judge and Caesar also left their original seats. Everyone gathered around Vegapunk, their eyes fixed on the wanted poster on the table. It really is 3 billion berries. Judge read out the numbers on the wanted poster with some difficulty. Queen, who hadn't heard York clearly earlier because of his singing and dancing, jumped up on the spot. How? How much? A bounty of 3 billion berries. He grabbed the wanted poster and started counting the zeros. Ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, millions, 10 millions, hundreds of millions, billions, it really is 3 billion. Queen's pupils dilated in shock. Fallen Master. Adolf D. York. As this name was officially spoken, the atmosphere on the scene grew even heavier. Immediately, Vegapunk explained his earlier conversation with York. Queen, who had known nothing before, changed his expression after listening and suddenly burst into laughter. Mwahahaha. Vegapunk, what are you agonizing over? This is good news. Compared to a greedy coward like Dufeld, following the fallen master is clearly better. At least we won't have to worry about those messy marine guys coming to disturb our research. As soon as these words were spoken, Caesar, the youngest, immediately agreed. That's right. Didn't the fallen master say that no matter how much money Dufeld gives us, he can give more? With more funding, we can conduct more research. You too. Judge held his forehead with one hand. You're only thinking about the benefits and not mentioning the cost at all, are you? We are currently cooperating with Dufeld, and both sides are equal and mutually beneficial. He provides the funding, we are responsible for the research, and occasionally we just throw him some insignificant research results. All the remaining money can be used for the research we want to pursue. After following the fallen master, do you think we will still have such freedom? Even if there's more funding, if all the research results have to serve the fallen master, is that what we want? To his surprise, after he finished speaking, both Queen and Caesar merely pouted. Whatever, as long as I have more money, I can do more research. The fallen master can fight, but does he understand science? In the end, it'll be pretty much the same as with Dufeld. You too. Judge looked at the 2 carefree individuals, then glanced at Stussy, who had remained silent, and felt a sudden pang of disappointment. Seeing that the 3 of them had argued enough, Vegapunk finally asked Stussy. Stussy, why exactly does the fallen master want to recruit us? You didn't leave with him and stayed here, so you must be willing to tell us the specific reason, right? The night passed without incident. The next day, York proactively invited Vegapunk and his team to meet. However, the meeting place was no longer the tavern from yesterday, but the natural dock where both parties had moored their ships. York sat cross-legged on the ground. Although he was only 2 meters tall, he exuded an aura of authority without needing to appear angry. After all, having been the king of Sky Island for a year, he had cultivated a certain presence of a superior. Coupled with the strong confidence his own strength gave York, the current York already possessed some of the demeanor of rocks from back then. The four-person Vegapunk group, now sober from their drunken state, saw York like this and felt a collective shiver down their spines, realizing they had underestimated York yesterday. Sit, York said, raising a hand. Although it's just grass, I imagine you won't mind. The four scientists hesitated slightly, but eventually sat down. It wasn't that they lacked conviction. As world-class scientists, they naturally had their own pride. However, more than pride, they understood what York's bounty meant. He truly had the power to kill them. And they, in all likelihood, wouldn't even have a chance to escape. Fortunately, Stussy had explained York's ideals to them yesterday. He was not a chaotic evil pirate. I still have the same question as yesterday. Are you willing to join my ranks? York was still so direct, he couldn't be bothered with empty pleasantries. Vegapunk tentatively began, my dream is to achieve world peace through the power of technology. Can you help me do that? I cannot achieve permanent peace. York shook his head frankly. The desires in human hearts are endless. As long as humans exist, conflict will always exist. If the peace you wish for is peace without conflict, then the best course of action is to destroy all humans. I cannot do that, nor do I wish to destroy all humanity. What I hope for, and what I believe I can achieve, is to become the king of the entire world. Through absolute power, I will suppress potential wars across the world, ensuring their conflicts occur within a regulated framework. At the very least, terrible human tragedies won't happen casually. Such suppression, of course, cannot last forever, but at least while I am alive, I can maintain this superficial peace. 100 years, or perhaps only a few decades of peace, I wonder if you can accept such peace. Vegapunk's mouth hung open, and he fell silent, lost in thought. Beside him, Judge saw Vegapunk give up and was the second to ask York a question. I want to revive Germa 66. Can you help me? Ha 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 ha. York threw his head back and laughed aloud. I am a man who will rule the entire world. North Blue will, of course, also be brought under my rule. However, if you are willing to serve as the governor of North Blue under me, the authority to govern North Blue is not something I cannot entrust to you. Judge tilted his head, looking at York. Are you that confident? Rox, a legendary figure, failed. Do you really think you're stronger than him? If I recall correctly, he was your captain. He. York smiled faintly. So what if he was my captain? I was just born later than him, that doesn't mean my abilities are inferior to his. What's more, precisely because of his failure, I am even more confident that I can succeed. Isn't it the same for your scientific experiments? Who can guarantee a 100% success rate on the first try? It's precisely because of numerous failures, and the accumulation of sufficient experience and lessons, that you can achieve the most perfect experimental results. Isn't my ambition to conquer the world based on the same principle? Judge's brows furrowed slightly. Clearly, York's words had struck a chord with him. Thus, after Vegapunk, he was the second to fall into silence and contemplation. Queen, no, at this time, before he changed his name, he should be called San. San looked at the first two individuals who had been persuaded, and suddenly realized that everything he wanted to say had already been spoken by the previous two. Even for unasked questions, answers could be indirectly found in York's earlier explanations. So, after a brief moment of thought, he asked York the question that concerned him most at the moment. If we join your ranks, will you restrict our freedom? As long as you don't betray me, and don't give away important research findings to others, you can go wherever you want, and do whatever you want. York held up a finger. My only requirement of you is one thing. No betrayal. San got the answer he wanted, closed his mouth, and simultaneously nudged Caesar beside him with his elbow. Caesar was the youngest of the four, but he asked a question the other three dared not voice. If we refuse your invitation, will you kill us? Of course. York grinned, revealing a gentle yet murderous smile. You four are the top 4 strongest scientists in the world today. If you don't join my ranks, no matter whose ranks you join, you will eventually become an obstacle to my unification of the world. I don't believe that if you kill one key person, thousands upon thousands more key people will emerge. The reason a so-called key person is key is precisely because he is irreplaceable. Therefore, if you are unwilling to accept my invitation, I will 100% kill you. I will nip any potential future risks in the bud. York's words were cold and blunt, but they also dispelled some of the four-person group's concerns. After all, someone who only knows how to say, "You're good, I'm good, everyone's good," could never achieve the ambition York spoke of. At this point, York paused briefly, then continued, "My patience is limited. You only have today to consider." With that, York said no more, and the four scientists collectively fell into silence. Time passed minute by minute, during which only Stussy and Ivankov brought some drinks and food. There was no other interaction between the two sides. Finally, Vegapunk seemed to have made up his mind. He was the first to nod towards York. "I can try to trust you once." Next was Judge. "I still have to revive Germa, so I can't die by your hand." San, looking calm and collected, nodded while popping snacks into his mouth. "I actually wanted to join a long time ago, but no one spoke first." Caesar glanced at San with disdain. "I don't want to die either, so I'll work under you for a while for now." Receiving the complete replies from all four, York grinned. "Excellent. I wish us pleasant cooperation in the future." After taking in the four scientists, York gave them a research topic. Why can each person only eat one devil fruit and not two? Have you ever thought about this question? I suspect it might be related to genes. To put it in a way you can understand better, humans might have a core code, and this core code can only accommodate one devil fruit. If you can thoroughly research this core code, you might be able to create 2 devil fruit users, or even 3 devil fruit users. After listening to York's words, the 4 scientists all expressed that they had a sudden flash of inspiration and all ran back to the MADS research ship to begin theoretical research. After arranging the 4 scientists, York and Stussy began to busy themselves with transporting shipbuilding timber. The treasure tree atom timber bought from Elbaf was easy to move into the mirror world because Elbaf had large enough mirrors. But moving it out was troublesome. After all, Water 7 did not have such large mirrors. There was no other way, so York and Stussy had to make one first. The method was, of course, very simple. Using technological means to condense water into ice, they created ice blocks of sufficient size. Then they polished the ice surface to achieve a mirror effect. Finally, they applied a special coating to the back, just like making a mirror. The purpose was to turn the ice block into a mirror, connecting with the mirror world to form a doorway. The practical effect of this mirror was not important at all. Eventually, after a period of busy work, York and his crew finally managed to transport the timber purchased from Elbaf to the shipyard. Looking at the huge and rare timber before him, Tom's eyes widened in surprise. Is this treasure tree atom? How can there be so much? And it's all pre-processed, the most perfect shipbuilding material. York smiled without speaking at Tom's surprise. The latter was also very sensible and did not ask too many questions. As a shipwright, he had always been clear about his responsibilities. So, after briefly estimating the dimensions of these timbers and the size of the ship that could be built, he began to discuss the design draft for the new ship with York. York first set the initial draft. It was a simple sketch he designed, referencing the Daming treasure ships from his memory. After reviewing it, Tom generally understood York's idea and produced a more refined design drawing. Based on the Oriental-style treasure ship, the original flat bottom was changed to a pointed bottom, while the bow was designed in the shape of a dragon head, the stern in the shape of a phoenix tail, and the main cabin style was predominantly Oriental. Of course, the most important thing was actually the size of the hull. The timber bought from Elbaf was spare shipbuilding material used by the giant race themselves. Even if Harold didn't give York the largest size, it was still perfectly possible to build a super large ship of about 300 to 400 meters. And after Tom's design, this new ship was approximately 360 meters long, about 140 to 150 meters wide, and the height from the deck to the bottom of the ship was also about 100 meters. Not to mention there were 2 more cabins above the deck. Such a large ship, let alone accommodating the scattered few members of the current Red Flag pirates, could easily fit a team of giants if York were to recruit them as crew members from Elbaf. After finalizing the design draft, Tom began construction. York thought that since he was idle anyway, he, Dragon, and Ivankov, the 3 of them, helped Tom by moving timber, treating it as physical exercise. Just like that, only a few days passed in the peaceful shipbuilding life. Tom was indeed worthy of being the future world's greatest shipwright. In just a few days, a third of the ship had already been built, and it was expected that within a month, the ship would officially be launched. However, just as York and Dragon were eagerly anticipating, a warship with a dog-head design suddenly appeared in the nearby waters not far from Water 7. York's keen observation Hockey detected the arrival of the uninvited guest immediately. It's Garp. He turned his head to look at Dragon, who was moving a piece of timber. Your old man is here, have you thought about how to face him? Dragon's expression stiffened, and his eyes darted away. Ah, how did he come? York shrugged. How would I know? But we've been in Water 7 for so long, it's not surprising that someone recognized our bounties and reported them to Marineford. That's probably what happened. Dragon gritted his teeth, put down the timber on his shoulder, and gazed at the approaching dog-head warship in the distance. I'll go talk to him, this isn't the place for a fight. As he spoke, Dragon's body twisted, swayed, and dissipated like the wind. Before long, a violent sonic boom was heard over the sea, and Dragon flew back at a speed even faster than a cannonball. In a flash, York saw a shoe print on Dragon's face. Boom. Dragon crashed into an abandoned ship graveyard not far from the shipbuilding site, the immense force almost causing him to smash through the entire graveyard and fall into the sea. But in the end, perhaps Garp held back, or perhaps Dragon stabilized himself. He barely stopped about 10 meters from the edge on the other side of the abandoned ship graveyard. York's face sank as he witnessed this scene. It wasn't because he was angry about Dragon's miserable encounter. A father hitting his son was something he, an outsider, couldn't interfere with. However, the direction Garp had sent Dragon flying just now was clearly aimed at the new ship still under construction. If Dragon hadn't actively shifted in the air, this new ship, already a third built, might have been destroyed. This was the true source of York's anger. Garp. York let out a low growl from his throat, leaping 100 meters from the shipbuilding site, his entire body radiating a brilliant, sacred white light. Tom, who was shipbuilding, was the first to grunt, followed by the locals of Water 7 not far away, and then the Marine soldiers on the dog-head warship at sea. Garp, relying on Hockey, was unaffected. But seeing more than half of his crew collapse before the fight even began on his ship, his old face also sank. This York, his ability is truly bizarre. With that said, he took a few running steps on the ship, made a huge leap, and directly crossed several thousand meters. Adolf D. York. Just obediently become this old man's catch. Rumble. Thunderous hockey lightning burst from Garp's body, and his fist, wrapped in extreme hockey, began to emit a dazzling crimson glow. HMPH. What you can do, I can do too. York snorted coldly, and after landing, he also made a big leap, heading straight for Garp. At the same time, the power of Haoshoku hockey began to condense on his fist. Although the shining light was not as bright as Garp's, it had a strong sense of shared origin. Garp. Fist bone. York. Fist bone. Garp. Galaxy impact. York. Crushing fist. Their fists struck simultaneously from 1,000 meters apart. The ultimate hockey energy erupted with a roar the moment the fists reached their maximum striking distance. Two massive, translucent fists collided over the sea. Boom. The seawater, after two fists collided from a distance, instantly split into two halves, stretching left and right as far as the eye could see. At the same time, a huge tsunami roared up, the water squeezed by the split volume high, each crashing in its own direction. Fortunately, Dragon returned to shore in time, activating his ability to unleash a whirlwind, blowing the encroaching seawater back. The shipbuilding site, including Water 7, barely escaped the catastrophe of being washed away by the tsunami. Compared to their side, Garp's dog-headed warship was much unluckier, directly pushed back several kilometers by the seawater. However, their personnel also suffered no casualties, it just meant it would take a little more time to sail over. Garp used moonwalk to stay in the air, and York followed suit. York indeed only knew the theory of the 6 styles before God Valley. But during God Valley, he saw Marine generals use it often. Although York's talent was average, his strength and physical toughness had reached this level, so learning it was not difficult. Garp withdrew his gaze from the split ocean below, revealing a standard, D-shaped smile. Kid, when did you secretly learn my moves? Are your moves a secret? York retorted with a sneer. Garp's punching techniques were quite unpretentious. As long as one's strength met the standard and they learned Shoku coding, imitating them was not difficult. If one could survive a punch from Garp, then imitating it would be even easier. Wahahaha. You have a point. But you, kid, are still a bit lacking. With a loud laugh, Garp's haki began to condense again. Seeing this, York, of course, was not to be outdone and continued to condense his haki. At the same time, he naturally did not forget to speak. Are you sure you want to fight here? When fighting you, I won't care about the lives of the people of Water 7. Garp frowned upon hearing this, truly having his weakness exploited by York. He had actually held back a bit in that punch, otherwise, with York's current strength, he wouldn't have been able to match him. And the reason he held back was also because he saw Water 7 behind York. It had only been a year since the God Valley incident. On that island, he learned the true nature of the celestial dragons, and because of this, he re-established his inner justice, no longer acting like a foolish loyal dog who completely believed in justice as he did before. Looking at the countless ordinary people still living normal lives in Water 7 behind York, the haki wrapped around Garp's fist gradually receded. HMPH. Don't get too smug, you stinky brat. With a cold snort, Garp used Moonwalk to leap towards York. York did not sense hostility from Garp and also used Moonwalk to return to Tom's shipbuilding site. Before long, York and Garp both landed. York dispersed the holy light that had been continuously emanating from his body, allowing Tom to slowly regain consciousness. Dad. Dragon silently walked to York's side and called out to Garp, a fresh shoe print still visible on his face. Garp looked at his son with a sneer. Look at you. You actually dared to become a pirate. Dragon's eyes sharpened, shedding his son's fear of his father. Dad, I decided to become a pirate after seeing the truth at God Valley. These words silenced Garp. He couldn't refute them, so he simply pointed his finger at York. Even if you became a pirate because of God Valley, why did you join this fool's crew? His evil deeds are no less than those of the celestial dragons. You must have seen the deaths of those thousands of nobles in the Sorbet Kingdom, right? Garp originally intended to persuade his son to return to the right path, but to his surprise, Dragon shook his head firmly again. It's different, father. This time, Dragon used the more formal address of father. York only kills those who deserve to die. The evil deeds of those nobles, killing them once is already letting them off easy. Father, you should know better than I do what happened in our hometown, the Goa Kingdom. If it weren't for those nobles monopolizing all resources, where would a place like the Great Terminal even exist? Garp was once again speechless. Having lost 2 verbal confrontations in a row, Garp realized the gap in their talk no jutsu, and simply abandoned reason, directly invoking his father's privilege. Wielding a fist as big as a sandbag, he punched Dragon to the ground. You brat. I'm your dad. What son talks back to his dad? Dragon was knocked to the ground by Garp, but instead of feeling wronged, he actually laughed. The reason was simple. Garp hitting him meant his stance was acknowledged, but Garp, due to his position, couldn't explicitly say so. Similarly, this also meant that after taking this beating, Garp wouldn't come looking for trouble with him again. So, Dragon was very happy to take this beating. York found a stone nearby and sat down, silently watching the father and son have a heart-to-heart. Once Garp had vented his frustration, he came back to York. Brat, what is your ambition? World peace. Bullshit. Heh, it really is world peace. York sneered. You probably can't understand, but true peace can only be achieved through force. Idiots who keep shouting that mutual understanding can bring peace, if they can't fight, no one will care about their stupid words. Garp's eyes narrowed slightly, he felt like York was alluding to someone. However, he couldn't be bothered to care who the alluded person was and simply continued to ask, to achieve the world peace you speak of, what do you plan to do? Kill all the old nobles. Overthrow the world government. Kill all the celestial dragons. And become the king of the world in a dignified manner. York did not hide anything, nor was there any need to. What he intended to do in the future, once done, no one would fail to realize it. In fact, if he said it truthfully now, others might even mistakenly think he was bragging. That's truly evil. Garp mercilessly retorted, a naturally evil brat like you, this old man should arrest you and throw you into Impel Down right now. But you can't. York grinned. Unless you're willing to let the lives of everyone in Water 7 be buried with me. Garp's fist instantly clenched, but then quickly relaxed. Ah, you brat, you're quite cunning. No, I'm just simply taking advantage of your kindness. York continued to twist the knife in Garp's heart. If it were Sengoku who came this time, I would absolutely not hesitate to turn and run, and I would decisively abandon this new ship, which is only 1/3 built. Two streams of white air puffed from Garp's nostrils. Are you implying that Sengoku doesn't care about the lives of the common people? He's not that kind of person. York retorted with a sneer, are you really sure? Garp fell silent once again. He couldn't win the war of words, and he was worried about harming the innocent civilians of Water 7 if he directly resorted to force. He was stuck between a rock and a hard place. Helpless, Garp could only find a stone to sit on and rest. Seeing this, Dragon voluntarily approached Garp and sat down, quietly recounting his specific experiences in Sorbet Kingdom. Of course, Dragon didn't mention anything about Sky Island. After all, that was their main base, and even though Garp was his biological father, he couldn't possibly tell Garp the location of their main base. Tom, who was gradually recovering from the effects of York's ability, looked around at the two sides who had stopped fighting, silently blushed, went home to take a shower, and changed his clothes. Not long after, the dog-headed battleship, which had been pushed away by the waves due to the collision of York's and Garp's hockey, sailed back and docked at the proper pier of Water 7. Garp's subordinate, Bogart, was still a young man in his early 20s. However, he was very sensible, leaving all his other subordinates at the pier and in the town, and only coming to find Garp by himself. Vice Admiral Garp, your snacks. Oh, it's Bogart. Your snacks arrived just in time, I'm bored right now. Throwing a bag of senbei he had brought over to Garp, Bogart turned to look at York, who was again helping Tom and Ivankov move timber. Aren't you going to arrest York? Can't. Garp answered, chewing on a senbei. You saw the commotion when he and I fought just now. If we don't want the innocent civilians of Water 7 to suffer casualties, then right now we can only watch that scoundrel build a ship there. Garp's words made Bogart silent for a moment. If it had been a year ago, he might have strongly urged Garp not to miss the chance to arrest York. But after the God Valley incident a year ago, his thoughts on the marine injustice had changed quite a bit. After a period of thought, Bogart also found a nearby stone and sat down like Garp. He unbuckled the long sword at his waist, propped it in front of him, clasped his hands on the hilt, and just stared at York and the others working. The day passed peacefully like this. That evening, when York arrived at a tavern in Water 7, he was surprised to see it already occupied by the marine. He, Stussy, Dragon, and Ivankov, a total of 4 pirates, walked into the tavern and were instantly stared at by dozens, even hundreds, of marine at the same time. And behind them were 2 experts, Garp and Bogart. Dragon and Ivankov instantly started to sweat a little, and even Stussy felt slightly uncomfortable. Of course, the main reason was the immense pressure from Garp behind them. However, York seemed to have seen nothing, walking directly to the bar counter of the tavern. Bring out all your liquor. I'm paying for all the drinks tonight. As soon as these words were spoken, the entire tavern fell silent for a moment. But the next second, a huge roar almost blew the roof off the tavern. How generous. As expected of the fallen master. A rich man. Brothers. Drink your fill. Let's try to drink him dry. Awoo. The marine in the tavern cheered enthusiastically, as if at this moment, it wasn't York the pirate who was buying them drinks, but Garp himself. Seeing this, Stussy let out a soft sigh. The atmosphere when they first entered the tavern, she almost thought a real fight would break out. Fortunately, it was all a false alarm. Her graceful body swayed her hips as she walked over and sat next to York. Garp and Bogart squeezed past Dragon and Ivankov, sitting on York's other side. Only then did Dragon and Ivankov follow, sitting next to Stussy. However, they had barely sat down when a marine soldier walked up, put his arm around Dragon's neck, and pulled him away from the bar counter. Dragon, I heard that when you joined the military, you didn't mention your relationship with Vice Admiral Garp and started from the bottom. That's a lot of backbone. Dragon was being pulled by the neck, his posture not very comfortable, but he wasn't angry. The reason was simple. The person holding him was an uncle who had watched him grow up, and although they weren't blood relatives, he was an old subordinate of Garp. Similarly, most of the people at the table where Dragon was pulled to sit were like this, having been very close to him in the past. Facing the teasing of these people, Dragon smiled a little awkwardly. As my father's son, I'm under a lot of pressure. And if I were to use my father's prestige to directly debut in the Marine with a high rank, I believe all of you would look down on me. Hearing this, the old soldiers immediately laughed boisterously. Dragon observed left and right amidst the laughter of the old soldiers. He noticed that many of the familiar faces from his childhood were gone, replaced by many young but completely unfamiliar faces. Clearly, in the God Valley battle, although Garp had won the ultimate renown, he had also paid a considerable price. Hey, Dragon, I can understand you becoming a pirate, but... An old soldier put his arm on Dragon's shoulder, and at the same time, gestured towards York. Why would you choose to follow the fallen master? That guy's ability is quite nasty. Today, I made a huge fool of myself in front of the newcomers. Dragon smiled awkwardly again, and could only try to explain. Ability is ability, and character is character. York is not a pirate in the traditional sense, he is a good person. I see. The old soldier who asked the question suddenly understood. Then he patted Dragon's shoulder several times forcefully. Since that's your judgment, then we choose to trust it. With that, he raised his glass high. Brothers. To Dragon finding a new ideal, cheers. Cheers. Glasses clinked, liquor spilled, and this small drinking party, hosted by pirates and enjoyed by the Marine, remained lively until midnight. The next morning, York, Dragon, and Ivankov once again followed Tom to build the new ship. Garp, Bogart, and a group of Marine who had crawled out of their hangovers, all arrived to watch. Ivankov's movements were a bit stiff under the gaze of this group. After all, the two sides were natural enemies. He had already been very uncomfortable drinking in the tavern yesterday, but the atmosphere was so good at the time that it didn't stand out. Today, with the Marine back to their serious selves and staring at them collectively, the psychological pressure was truly immense. York glanced at Ivankov, who could barely even walk, and then looked at Garp and his group with a half-moon eye. I know you're waiting for me to finish building the ship and then make a move on me after I set sail, so as to minimize the impact of the bottle's aftermath on Water 7. But if that's the case, what's the point of you just standing there staring? Come over and help. The sooner you help me build the ship, the sooner you can capture me at sea. Don't you even understand that much? Huh, what kind of joke is that? We are the Marine. How could we possibly help you, a pirate, build a ship? The Marines cursed, expressing disdain for York's wishful thinking. But Garp, after a brief moment of thought, walked over and helped carry a log. The Marines all froze at the sight. Then, the veterans who had followed Garp for many years shook their heads helplessly. Well, what this pirate said makes a little sense. The sooner we help him build his ship, the sooner we can capture him and throw him into Impel Down, and the sooner we can go home. Everyone, let's help out. With that, the veterans followed Garp and joined the shipbuilding team. The new recruits exchanged glances, completely baffled by Garp and the veterans' actions. Since when did the Marine and pirates get along so well? However, recalling last night, it seemed they had already drunk with pirates. Forget it. Vice Admiral Garp is leading the charge anyway. If the higher-ups want to punish anyone, they'll punish Vice Admiral Garp first. Brothers, let's go help. York silently watched the group of Marines, who were outwardly reluctant but physically honest, come over to help. A kind smile played on his lips as he spoke to Ivankov and Kaido beside him. You see, there isn't that much complexity between people. Treat someone to a drink and a meal, and two people can become good friends. Perhaps interests and stances will still lead to conflict in the end, but as long as there's no conflict between the two sides, everyone is actually the same. Of course, those old nobles who have disowned their humanity, or the trash Marines and trash pirates who slaughter civilians, are not included in this category. Kaido and Ivankov listened thoughtfully. With the help of the Marines, the pirate ship, which was originally expected to take at least 15 days to build, was perfectly completed in just 8 days. All that was left was for York to hoist the pirate flag and move the ship into the sea, and then they could officially set sail. It's finally finished. A group of Marines, exhausted and panting, collapsed to the ground, gazing up at the colossal object before them, unable to help but exclaim. It's really huge, this ship. Our Marine's standard flagship is only 70 meters long. This ship's length alone is 5 times that of our Marine flagship. Hey, Fallen Master. How many people do you plan to recruit to build such a huge ship? Stussy held a towel and wiped the sweat from York's brow. The latter, hearing the Marine's question, put his hands on his hips and smiled faintly. A ship can hold 3,000 to 5,000 people. But the main reason this ship is built so big is because my crew members are very tall. York raised his hand and pointed at Kaido. And in the future, I might even be able to recruit the giant race. If the ship isn't built big enough in advance, after recruiting the giant race later, am I supposed to make them crouch all day? That's true. The Marines all nodded at his words. Because of the policies of King Harold of Elbaf in recent years, the Marine had already absorbed quite a few giant race vice-admirals. The enormous size of these giant race vice-admirals indeed made it difficult for them to move around on the Marine's original standard warships. For this reason, the headquarters had even specially custom-made larger flagships, almost 100 meters long, for these giant vice-admirals. Including the cabin space, which was also built exceptionally large. Ordinary Marine soldiers walking on the ship felt like they were walking inside a moving castle. Hey, kid, stop talking about the giant race. If you sail out today, I'll lock you up and impel down today. You won't have a later. Garp's voice suddenly rang out, startling the distracted Marine soldiers. That's right. We are the Marine. We're here to catch pirates. Helping you build a ship was just so you'd leave Water 7 sooner, and we could catch you more easily. Don't misunderstand. You fool Fallen Master. York burst into laughter at that. Of course. How could I forget? With that, he immediately called out. Kaido. The tall Kaido grinned maliciously, immediately activating his devil fruit transformation, and a massive azure dragon soared into the sky. Whirro whirro whirro. A thunderous laugh echoed from the sky, and the massive azure dragon's head, dozens of meters in size, slowly lowered. You've been helping us build the ship for days, you must be out of energy now. Marines. Kaido's voice was filled with mischief. Although York had paid for the Marines' drinks and food all these days, it was precisely because of this that the Marines reciprocated and worked extra hard. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to build such a massive pirate ship in just 8 days. The Marines belatedly realized what was happening and let out a wail. Oh no! It's a trap. They scrambled to their feet, gasping for breath, intending to attack York, but suddenly realized their guns weren't with them. To make working easier, I left my gun at the inn. Me too. My sword. My sword is on the warship. Ah. My rocket launcher. I didn't bring my rocket launcher. Fallen Master, he's too cunning. He tricked us into working and made us put away our weapons. Garp's face was dark as he watched the group of Marines act. These scoundrels knew full well that this ship would be finished today, they were doing this purely on purpose. Fortunately, Garp didn't need weapons to fight. With a loud bang, terrifying Haoshoku lightning erupted from Garp's body, and the Marines all froze again. Vice Admiral Garp. Wait a minute. We worked so hard to build this ship, we can't just destroy it like this. Don't forget our original intention, Vice Admiral Garp. We helped them build the ship to get them to sail away from Water 7 as quickly as possible. Don't forget that, Vice Admiral Garp. After recovering from their daze, the Marines immediately embraced Garp, urging him to calm down. Garp was held by his arms and legs by a group of people. Although he could easily throw them all off, he had to admit that they had a point. If he destroyed the ship here, wouldn't all their hard labor these past few days have been for nothing? With the obstruction of a large group of subordinates, Garp temporarily abandoned the idea of fighting on the spot. Seizing the opportunity, Kaido directly activated his Flame Cloud's ability, supporting the bottom of the pirate ship from below, causing it to gradually lift off the ground and ascend into the sky. Let go of me. This ship is flying away. Garp immediately became anxious at the sight, but the Marines still held him tightly. No, Vice Admiral Garp, they're flying straight up. If you knock them down now, they'll still land here. You idiots. Garp was so furious he cursed loudly. But despite his curses, his subordinates still held him firmly in place. Of course, this might also be related to York himself remaining in place, not flying away with the pirate ship. York watched Garp with a smile, quietly waiting for Kaido and the pirate ship to disappear into the sky. At this point, the Marines no longer restrained Garp, who broke free and walked up to York. Brat. I let the pirate ship go, but don't even think about escaping from me next time. I'm not running, I'm even willing to fight you. York turned his head. Ivankov was running over from nearby, carrying a full-length mirror. The mirror was set down, and Stussy gently touched its surface before walking directly into it. Immediately after, Ivankov did the same. The next second, Garp reached out and blocked York. Don't even think about escaping from me. I said I wouldn't run. York sighed, speechless. If he really wanted to run, would he have stood still the entire time? It's not convenient to fight in Water 7. You don't want to harm the residents here, and I don't want to destroy this place. So, York raised a hand and pointed at the full-length mirror. On the other side of that is another independent space. If the two of us fight in there, we won't hurt anyone outside. Of course, if you're afraid of being ganged up on by my crew and don't dare to enter, that's fine too. Anyway, I'm the only one left now, and I'll always find a way to escape from your grasp. York wore a confident smile, as if certain that Garp would accept his challenge. And Garp did indeed look somewhat tempted. However, as time ticked by, Garp remained silent, and York's expression gradually darkened. Well, Garp, you're actually playing tricks on me now. Hey, you've finally noticed. Garp, who had been in deep thought, grinned, revealing his standard, smile. You're too dangerous, kid. Although I don't particularly like Sengoku's strategy, this is indeed the best chance to capture you. As he finished speaking, the silhouettes of warships suddenly appeared on the distant sea. York looked over from afar and clearly saw large Chinese characters written on the two leading warships. Sengoku. Suru. I didn't expect Sengoku and Vice Admiral Suru to both come. Adding you, it's practically the three giants of the marine gathered. York was slightly surprised, but there was little panic on his face. After the initial annoyance, he once again regained his confident smile. This time, it was Garp who was surprised. He punched and shattered the full-length mirror York had brought over, asking in a deep voice, "Kid, aren't you scared at all?" "Scared? What's there to be scared of?" York replied with a smile. "I've faced opponents of God Valley's caliber, what's there to fear about a mere marine encirclement? Besides, how can you, who think you've outsmarted me, be so sure that I wasn't intentionally surrounded by you?" Garp's eyes widened, his pupils contracting, as if he couldn't quite believe York's words. "You brat, are you trying to trick me? Whether I'm tricking you, you can judge for yourself." York walked over to a stone and sat directly on it. He sat cross-legged, showing no intention of running away. "I'll give you time. Make whatever preparations you want. It's best if you transfer all the residents of Water 7 out, that way, I'll have no reservations when I fight." Garp's brow furrowed slightly. York's confident demeanor truly did somewhat intimidate him. But no matter how much he thought about it, he couldn't figure out where York's confidence came from. If York could previously threaten Garp with the lives of Water 7's residents, now that he had even said such things, Garp truly didn't know where his confidence stemmed from. HMPH. Brat. You better not regret this. York grinned. The ones who should hope not to regret this are you. Saying this, York's gaze swept over the people surrounding him. At this moment, he felt a certain degree of regret. Because this group of Marine soldiers, who had followed Garp for many years or joined his command out of admiration for Garp, would soon be annihilated by him. They were a group of Marines with true justice in their hearts, and it was a great pity to kill them. But there was no other way. He had to survive, and the path of revolution required blood to pave it. This was already the method he could think of that would cause the least casualties. He couldn't just give up for fear of minor setbacks. Seeing the fleeting pity in York's eyes, Garp's confusion grew stronger. Where exactly did this kid's confidence come from? Could it be the legendary Devil Fruit Awakening? But even with Devil Fruit Awakening, Garp didn't think it was that impressive. Over the years, he hadn't failed to capture those great pirates with awakened devil fruits on the high seas. Although some were tricky, they were still manageable. York also noticed Garp's confusion. Where did his confidence truly come from? It was actually very simple. Devil Fruit Awakening. However, his Devil Fruit Awakening was just a tiny bit different from everyone else's Devil Fruit Awakening. To explain this, time needed to rewind to a month before York and the others came to Water 7 from Sky Island, 38 days ago. After finishing his daily training with Kaido and Dragon, York found a secluded spot to meditate cross-legged. This practice was both a way to relax his mind and to summarize and comprehend the problems encountered during his training through quiet contemplation. In fact, this was also how York obtained his devil fruit back then. He would hold a small cantaloupe in his palm and continuously make wishes to it through meditation, thereby twisting it into a devil fruit. It was during this day of meditation and reflection that York's consciousness suddenly entered an unfamiliar world. Here, light swirled, as if the entire world was enveloped in light. But at the same time, there was nothing here. No, nothing wasn't entirely accurate, there was still one thing here. At the center of this entire world of light stood a person almost identical to York himself. However, his hair was half black and half white, and the pupil and iris on the black-haired side were pure white, while the pupil and iris on the white-haired side were pure black. Besides this, his clothes were also half black and half white. He wore a set of ancient hanfu from York's previous life. The black-haired side had pure white clothes with a black sun pattern. Similarly, the white-haired side had corresponding pure black clothes with a white sun pattern. York slowly walked up to this person who looked almost identical to himself but had completely different hair color and attire. He spoke with a light laugh. Devil Fruit Awakening. Should we also come up with a theory of King and Mount? On their way from Sky Island to Water 7, York had called his companions for a secret meeting on the ship. More precisely, this secret meeting was held in Stussy's mirror world. Inside the mirror world, patched with dark and light checkered squares, were York, Gloriosa, Stussy, Shaki, Kaido, Dragon, Ivankov, Ginny, Kuma, and Teach. 10 core members of the pirate crew gathered, and although Teach was still quite young and naive, York brought him along. This trip to Water 7 to meet with the Mads Institute, and the shipbuilding that's already underway there, will definitely be discovered by the Marine. And they will most likely launch a large-scale encirclement and suppression operation, at least a buster call. York got straight to the point, not harboring any luck mentality that they might not be discovered. Upon hearing this, everyone's expressions collectively darkened. Ivankov, who didn't know much about the God Valley War, asked, "Why? Is it because of us?" York gently shook his head. "It's mainly because of me." He grinned and said, "You all know my ability. I gave two Gorosei, and the king of the world behind them, a harsh blow." As soon as he said this, Ivankov, who had wanted to ask more questions, immediately shut his mouth. Ginny even felt her teeth ache. To be hit hard by the captain's ability. Eek. Ginny shivered all over. No wonder the captain predicted that the Marine would launch a major encirclement against us. Kaido grinned upon hearing this. Worororo. Can we fight a big battle like God Valley again? Amidst his laughter, Kaido's entire body exuded a considerable amount of fighting spirit. York glanced at him, then looked at the others. Gloriosa, Stussy, and Shaki all showed a hint of worry in their eyes, but after York looked at them, it instantly turned into determination. They didn't want to experience the tragedy of God Valley a second time, but if they couldn't avoid it, they were prepared to fight to the death with York. Dragon, on the other hand, had a bit more concern. Because he knew without guessing that if Water 7 became a second God Valley, his father, Garp, would definitely participate in the battle. At that time, a father-son showdown, regardless of the odds of winning, he wasn't mentally prepared for how to face such a battle. Besides these immediate combatants, Kuma and Teach also showed different states. Kuma was more fearful, he hadn't fully transitioned from his past weak mentality as a slave. And York estimated that this weakness, if he didn't personally kill a celestial dragon, might stay with him for life. Teach was simpler than Kuma. Although he was only 2 years old during the God Valley incident, children in this world could not be compared to ordinary children in York's previous life. At just 2 years old, Teach already had memory capabilities and could simply understand some principles. So, the attitude he displayed at this moment was hatred. However, Teach knew he had no place to speak in this meeting, so he just let the flames of hatred surge in his eyes, saying nothing. York took in everyone's expressions and calmly said, "I'm not going to let you risk yourselves in this battle." What? Gloriosa was the first to frown. York continued, "I plan to crush the Marines' major encirclement alone." Are you kidding me? Anger began to rise in Gloriosa's tone. Even if Rox is your idol, you don't have to imitate him like this. Didn't you personally say that the power of unity is far stronger than that of an individual? York smiled faintly and took Gloriosa's small hand, cupping it in his palms to offer her comfort. I'm not imitating Rox, my strategic goals are different from his. After a slight pause, York continued to explain, my devil fruit has awakened. I plan to give the Marine a harsh blow with its awakened power. The strategic goal this time isn't to kill experts like Garp and Sengoku, but to let them know that I have the ability to take them down with me. Upon hearing this, Gloriosa's delicate brows remained furrowed. Fruit awakening. Even if your fruit awakens, it would only make people more easily addicted to pleasure, right? What does that have to do with taking them down with you? Can the ability be applied once and last forever? As she spoke the last sentence, Gloriosa's eyes finally lit up. If the ability can truly be applied once and never be escaped, your fruit awakening is indeed quite terrifying. Everyone heard this and collectively imagined the scene. More powerful than the original ability's effect, even experts like Garp and Sengoku couldn't resist it, and once used, one would never wake up from pleasure. Everyone present, except Teach, shivered in unison. It's not what you're guessing. York chuckled. My fruit awakening is a bit special, but the destructive effect is pretty much what you guessed. If Garp and Sengoku aren't careful enough, there's a good chance they could die by my hand. Hearing that York's devil fruit ability was so powerful, everyone's worried hearts finally eased a little. Only Kaido couldn't help but sigh. I want to participate too, is it really not possible? York shook his head slightly. My awakening doesn't distinguish between friend and foe. Besides myself, who can remain unaffected, you could also be taken down by me if you're there. Kaido inhaled deeply in defiance, 2 puffs of white smoke emerging from his nostrils, but in the end, he chose to listen to the advice. I'm still not strong enough. Time returned to the present. York sat cross-legged on a rock, turning his head to look at Dragon, who hadn't left with the others. Dragon, you should also hurry and escape. With your ability, you should be able to reach a safe zone before I make my move. Dragon looked at York with worry. Captain. York raised his hand, stopping his next words. Don't worry. If I wasn't confident enough, I wouldn't have actively come out of seclusion. Seeing York's resolute attitude, Dragon gritted his teeth and shouted at Garp, old man. Tell the Marine to retreat. Captain York is truly prepared this time. Although I don't know how he plans to deal with you, if you don't retreat beforehand, you might all die here. However, Garp remained unmoved after hearing his advice. Brat. You're too naive if you think you can trick us Marine into retreating with deceptive tactics. Seeing that he couldn't persuade Garp, Dragon went to persuade the old soldiers under Garp's command. As a result, these old soldiers were just as resolute as Garp. It's only right for the Marine to capture pirates. Even if we die because of it, that is our long-cherished wish. Dragon, you should listen to your captain and leave quickly. Our target is only Adolf D. York. You are not our mandatory capture target. If you don't leave now, it will be difficult to leave once Vice Admiral Sengoku and Vice Admiral Suru and their people arrive. He tried to persuade them back and forth, but he couldn't persuade anyone. Dragon, who clearly knew the firm attitudes of both sides, had an indescribable complexity in his eyes. Finally, after persuading the last Marine soldier, who still refused to leave the battlefield, Dragon could only, with a heart full of melancholy, transform into a breeze and disappear from the island. After Dragon left, York then turned to Tom, who hadn't had time to leave yet. Master Tom, you should leave quickly too. Water 7 will become a brutal battlefield, and it's very likely the entire island will be destroyed. You should hurry and notify the residents on the island to take shelter. Tom likewise looked at York with worry, then at Garp and his group who surrounded York. Regarding the conflict between these two sides, it felt wrong for him to persuade or resent either of them. York had merely sailed to Water 7 to ask him to build a ship and hadn't done anything wrong. The Marines had also only come to this island to arrest York, a wanted man. Neither side seemed to be in the wrong. But once this battle erupted, Water 7 would suffer. Who should he blame? Should he blame Garp and York for being too strong? That an island would be destroyed just from them fighting? After much thought, Tom ultimately said nothing and dared not say anything. He just let out a soft sigh before leaving. Watching his receding figure, York still said to Garp, "Notify the Marine fleet to evacuate the people on the island as soon as possible. It will be too late if they delay." Garp frowned, but seeing York emphasize this matter repeatedly, he chose to take it seriously. He waved his hand, and immediately, several veteran Marines broke away from the encirclement to notify the approaching Marine fleet. Before long, ship after ship departed from Water 7. There weren't many stubborn people who refused to leave even in the face of danger. After all, with the Marine Army pressing down, it was clear a major battle was imminent. If they didn't leave now, what if they were hit by stray bullets? Cannonballs don't have eyes, and they weren't monsters who could withstand cannon fire with their bodies. Thus, an evacuation activity continued from dawn until dusk. It wasn't until all this was done that Sengoku and Suru, leading a few of their trusted subordinates, arrived at the Marine encirclement. Adolf D. York. As soon as Sengoku arrived, he scrutinized York from head to toe. "It really is you, brat, Adolf York." York looked at Sengoku and grinned. "Long time no see, Vice Admiral Sengoku. I truly thank you for turning a blind eye back then, otherwise, I wouldn't have lived to see today." Hearing this, Sengoku couldn't help but sigh softly. Why did you do it? What happened back then is over. Wouldn't it be better to live quietly as a civilian in an allied country? No. York refused adamantly, and at the same time, his eyes turned cold. "The grudge for my parents is irreconcilable." Although York found it hard to regard his parents of this life as his original biological parents, his parents of this life had, after all, fulfilled their responsibilities as parents. To put it bluntly, aside from his soul and memories coming from another world, this body was indeed bestowed by his parents of this life. They were York's biological parents. 16 years ago, before the destruction of the Ceramic Kingdom, York's birthplace in this life, York had indeed thought about being a civilian. Even though he was already attempting to distort and create devil fruits at the time, he still leaned towards joining the Marine rather than becoming a pirate. After all, for a transmigrator who neither transmigrated to Luffy's era nor had any system or golden finger, the best choice was actually to join the Marine. Join the Marine to muddle through life, manage a small branch somewhere in the Four Seas, be a local despot, live peacefully until old age, and when Luffy and his crew set sail, act as a mentor old grandpa for the main characters, and even if the world government was overthrown later, he would still have a good ending. York had even planned out what he would do after joining the Marine. As a result, the peaceful island was suddenly surrounded by the Marine, the world government's flag appeared on the shore, and CP agents disembarked from the ships, loudly announcing, "This will be the summer camp location for the Celestial Dragons, and all people on the island are forbidden to leave the island." The other people on the island didn't realize the seriousness of the situation. The king even thought his long-held desire to join the world government had been answered. Only York knew what was about to happen. But unfortunately, he hadn't obtained a devil fruit at that time. It wasn't until that moment, when his parents of this life were shot dead by a celestial dragon to protect him, that York erupted in extreme anger, and the small sweet melon he had always carried with him was completely distorted into the Joy Joy fruit. After eating the Joy Joy fruit, York killed the celestial dragon who had shot his parents of this life, then used the advantage of his ability to hide on Sengoku's ship, and finally, because of Sengoku's compassion, he became who he is today. Putting away his memories, York stared fixedly at Sengoku. "Vice Admiral Sengoku, you saved my life, so I don't want to go too far. You still have time to leave with the Marine now." Sengoku also shook his head gently. "First I'm a Marine, arresting pirates is my natural duty. Moreover, it was I who let you escape back then, so now it should be even more my responsibility to bring you to justice." Hearing this, York regretfully closed his eyes. It still ended up like this. Although I had anticipated this day from the moment I chose revenge, I didn't expect it to come so quickly. While he was still lamenting, Sengoku and Garp made no move, but Suru suddenly flashed behind York. A pair of soft, white hands reached out, grabbed York, and with a forceful shake, as if shaking water from wet clothes, York turned into a light, fluttering strip of cloth. Then Suru squeezed and scrubbed the cloth like York, and York's originally regretful expression quickly transformed into a clear yet foolish gaze under her scrubbing. After a busy period, the now washed York was hung on a clothesline. This clothesline was brought by Suru's subordinates. I will wash away the evil in your heart. Suru clapped her hands, looked at the cloth-like York hanging there, and said with a smile, Sengoku told me you were originally a good child. The power of the wash fruit can help you wash away the hostility in your heart. Is that so? The cloth-like York's eyes instantly regained clarity, and at the same time, a terrifying conqueror's haki erupted from him. The black and red haki lightning instantly stunned most of the Marines. Only Sengoku, Garp, Suru, and the elite members of their subordinates could still stand. But even so, besides their deputies, most of them could only kneel on the ground, struggling to resist. The flattened York, under this burst of haki, returned to normal and broke free from the clothesline. With his feet on the ground, he looked calmly at Suru. Your wash fruit doesn't seem to have an effect on me. Impossible. Suru was immediately shocked. How could my devil fruit ability not affect you? York suddenly grinned. The ability of the wash fruit can indeed wash away the evil and filth in a person's heart. But, if my heart is inherently inclined towards light, what then of your devil fruit ability? Thanks for watching.